Let them kill us all and we'll stand and watch. Well, brother, that ain't for me. I'll be running and a jumping and a skipping and a bopping when they blow me to smithereens.
What is the point of government? As an anarchist, I would say ideally it would be great if we didn't need one, but I also don't believe that we're in a position to be in that state of affairs yet. I believe it relies on post-scarcity and a change in thinking that we have not yet begun to approach. To me, that desire for an anarchistic society is more of a guiding light. I want the maximum amount of possible freedom for the maximum number of people. Socialist thought tends to see the point of government as being its administrative and arbitrative functions. That is, that it runs the various things that make civilized living possible and settles disputes between people. Now, people aren't used to associating socialism with the idea of a limited state, but it is very clearly linked to socialism that the idea is a limited state in that sense, that it is limited to an administrative and arbitrative role. Marxists think that the state should run absolutely everything, under the Marxist definition of socialism, and then they believe that some sort of miracle occurs and the whole thing sort of withers away into something that is really not particularly different to the ideal of anarchism. The right wing tends to say that they want small government, but these days that only really seems to apply to taxation and business. Otherwise, they seem to see the role of the state as a sort of enforcement arm of some dominant moral or religious schema imposing that upon others, and to that end they are perfectly willing to expand the state massively in all of its engines of oppression and spying and observation and enforcement. As Democrats, small d, we seem to want to say that the government should reflect the will of the people, which is why we have elections after all. But despite elections, it seemingly doesn't do that at all. In the UK, for example, the first-past-the-post system thoroughly distorts people's actual desires and positions to the point of being massively unrepresentative. Couple that with corruption, influence and disinformation, and you have a real problem calling what we have a democracy. The US has all of the same problems on steroids, and it's a profoundly undemocratic system that also seems determined to stop being a republic. European and especially Northern European nations seems to have cracked this problem with localized democracy, proportional representation of one kind or another, and administrative socialist state apparatus, and that combination seems to come to the most optimal results in the world, at least for now. Even they are under assault by the same forces that have undermined the Anglosphere. In a way, if you think about it, all governments, no matter how despotic, have to serve the will of the people to some degree. The common man must at least be bamboozled or propagandized or given some sop of comfort. The state must take care of him to some degree or another, lest he lose his tolerance and rise up. We saw this in the post-Soviet period, with country after country toppling their dictators because they forgot this fundamental principle and instead chose to enrich themselves. We also saw a less successful version of this in the Middle East in more recent times, and a slower version in the old Third World in the Cold War sense. In times of monarchy, this idea of having to take care of the little people would have been called noblesse oblige, the idea that a ruler had a duty to their people to try and be a fair and compassionate ruler. It didn't work out that way a lot of the time, but it was a nice idea, certainly. Increasingly, however, we seem to be living in a late-stage capitalist hellscape, ruled, at least obliquely, by an oligarchic elite of tech barons, like Elon Musk. Less noblesse oblige, more noblesse obese, I guess. These psychopaths, and I don't mean the well-meaning duffers demonized as part of the World Economic Forum, but these people have no concept of being a dutiful or responsible monarch. They have the rapacious appetite and poor impulse control of a locust. They even seem to lack the sense of self-preservation that dictators and monarchs have sometimes had in the past. They don't fear the people, they're not held accountable by the people, and as a result, the puppets that they've installed into government don't seem to fear the people either. And maybe they don't have to fear. After all, they've managed to convince traditionalists and bootlickers that they're rebels and revolutionaries, even as the rest of the world looks at America's absolute fucking state with horror and trepidation, and votes against it or anything like it occurring where they are. This seems to make no difference. And here in the UK, the political landscape is looking pretty fucking bleak. We had a repudiation of conservatism, and that has entrenched as Trump's period in office stretches on. But despite that, and despite the majority left-wing ideals of the majority of the British public, the Labour Party had to move to the right to get elected, and now is going even further right in a fruitless quest to draw back reform voters. Those reform voters think the Labour Party are a band of paedophile communists and will never believe them when they lurch to the right or vote for them anyway. So this seems like a pointless endeavour, and one that is just sacrificing their core voters. Which isn't to say that the Labour Party aren't also doing some good things on workers' rights, for example. It's just that it's not enough, nor fast enough, nor far-reaching enough, and it's not having enough effect on people's day-to-day lives. It's the same mistake that Biden presidency made. They're compromising too many long-standing principles along the way. When we vote for Labour or another left-wing party, we don't expect them to beat up on immigrants, who we need. We don't expect them to immiserate the disabled. We don't expect them to take heating payments away from pensioners. Now, that last one, the fuss over extra grants for heating bills for pensioners, was massively overblown, because really all they were doing was means testing it. Pointless, but not particularly harmful. But that issue has become a totemic issue of Labour no longer being what they're supposed to be, and there doesn't seem to be any appetite even from within Labour's ranks to rebel against this stuff. And even with all this unpopular shit going on, the good things that they are doing are really just tinkering around the edges of fundamental problems in British society. If they can't, won't, or don't address these, then a lurch to the far right seems depressingly inevitable, and without electoral reform, unstoppable. Yet nothing seems to move the needle anywhere if it's not backed by botnets, social media, billions of dollars in out-and-out bribes. People seem to have given up, to have become apathetic, or worse, to be cheering on the dismantling of all our civilizational achievements since World War II. Those people who do try to protest are seen as annoyances, and if anything, their actions simply support and entrench the opposite point of view. In America especially, but elsewhere too, this dismantling is going on, and people are flirting with the kinds of politics that led to World War II. No coincidence, I think, that this is happening as the last World War II veterans die off, as has been made abundantly clear during VE Day recently. Maybe this should have been an off-topic Tuesday instead of a pretentious waffle, but I guess here's the pretentious part. I studied politics and history. I have retained a keen interest in both and continue to do reading on both. It is tempting to draw the parallels between now and the 1930s, but while history rhymes, I don't think it's the same. Fascism had many forms between Italy, Germany, Spain and elsewhere, And it was never quite the same. It preyed upon similar instincts, but the form was never quite identical. American fascism similarly has its own face, a sham democracy, a capitalist glamour that doesn't quite look like jackboots and sea coils, except when it does. Liberals and the left remain timid. There seems to have been no recovery, in the Anglosphere at least, since the collapse of the ideal of communism, but there are many other strands of left-wing and liberal politics to explore and to apply, many of them wildly successful. They seem afraid of the beliefs of their own voter base in a way that they weren't in the 1930s. Or worse, those on the left who are as radical as the far right has become are little different to them, save in vocabulary. And then there's the internet and new media, the mass-scale manipulation of messaging and information moderation. This kind of propagandizing is more insidious and subtle and less obvious than what we see coming out of North Korea, and it's often chosen by the victim, manipulating themselves through who they block, who they follow, the things they subscribe to and the things they don't, engineering themselves into echo chambers of their own pre-existing prejudices that never get challenged or disturbed. So the pretension is then that I think I have some amazing insight into all of this, and depressingly I don't see any way out of it. All I have is knowledge and rhetoric, and I can't persuade anyone, since they're either here because they want to argue and to fight, not to listen or understand, or they already agree with me. Most people, the vast majority of people, will never even encounter what it is I have to say, wherever I say it, and endless political posturing and gesturing is tedious anyway, and turns a lot of people off, so this will be great for my channel. I've had a lot of time while flat on my arse recently to watch the news, think about this stuff, look at the undercurrents of things that are going on, and it just gets more depressing day by day. And I think the really horrible times are still to come, unfortunately. What especially depresses me are the people cheering on and supporting the destruction of the very things that keep their life tolerable. That's just sad. I think I'll be back to somewhat normal scheduling next week, so I will see you later. Zang.
Hi, I'm Skip Breakfast, and you're watching Newsload. We're getting reports of a new card game which purports to make fun of the political and social hellscape in which we find ourselves, somehow turning this into a fun pastime for groups of slightly drunken friends to try and outdo each other. But there's one important question on everyone's lips: just how exactly do you play?